All right. Hey guys, welcome to our workshop live. So we do these lives every week on this channel. Just talk about anything related to off-grid power, van life, van conversions, all sorts of stuff like that. Kind of updates and just what we're up to, that sort of thing. Talk through, answer questions about off-grid power, van life, van conversions, all that sort of good stuff. So yeah, if you joined us last week, we were talking about battery management systems, or BMSs as they are abbreviated, and the difference between an active balancer and passive balancing. So this is one of the ones that I was talking about last week, which is a passive balancer. It's called a DALI BMS, made by a Chinese company called DALI. And yeah, these are very good. We use these a lot, but I was going to try out an active balancer for the battery in my camper van, and unfortunately didn't go that well. Had all sorts of problems, actually couldn't get the thing working. Followed the instructions. I have the instructions here actually. And one of the drawbacks with that balance, so it's this balancer made by Deligreen, which I think are actually a company owned by DALI. Not 100% sure, but on AliExpress, these guys, their company name is DALI Factory Company or something like that. So I think it's probably owned by the same guys, but yeah, we didn't have much success. I actually bought two of these things. I was talking about them last week on the live, and I put one of them into my camper van onto the battery and didn't get any results from it. So it's meant to regulate the voltage of your cells, and then it works, and if it moves charge between your different cells and keeps them all at the same level. So the trouble with these ones is that they only do anything if it's a passive balancer. It only balances your cells if you're charging or if you're discharging the battery. But if the battery is just sitting there not doing anything and nothing being drawn from it, nothing being put into it, then it just sits there and the cells can do what they want. Whereas an active balancer, it'll be moving voltage between all of the cells as it just sits there, even if you're not actually charging or discharging the battery. And yeah, so I had two of these, as I mentioned, and put them both in one after the other. Couldn't get them to work. There's no LEDs on it or any way of turning it on or anything like that. It just, as soon as you connect it correctly, then it just starts working. And yeah, had no success getting it working. And yeah, so I landed up trying both of them. Couldn't get either of them to work. Sent photos and videos to the seller, asked them questions, tried to get some advice on how we could get the thing working, and no luck. So yeah, landed up them asking if I'd be willing to send it back to them in China. They'll either refund me or replace them, and they'll do some tests and just see what they can find and see if they can find what the problem is. But yeah, so that was the update on the active balancer. No success so far. So the BMS that I have on my battery in my camper van, it is a passive BMS as well, so it just balances the cells when it's charging, and there's one particular cell that it just can't get to keep in line with the other cells. So somebody just said Victron for the win. Yeah, Victron make excellent equipment. They're probably top of the game as far as what they do, but they don't do any BMS as far as I know. So they don't do any systems to balance lithium iron phosphate cells. They do make some batteries which are very good, but they're also very expensive as well. So for what you can get in terms of like a 100 amp hour or 200 amp hour battery system, you could probably get it for a fraction of the price. Like this lithium iron phosphate battery here, all in with a BMS like this, you're looking at probably about $600, and that'll be 285 amp hours. So it's much better value for money than something like a Victron. Probably last longer, probably last just as long there. Although Victron support is probably better. Links distributor with the shunt and BMS. I don't know if that's an active balancer though. I suspect it's probably a passive. Yeah, so their lithium batteries have BMS built in, but they probably you'd have to look at it in a bit more detail and probably dismantle the battery, but I suspect it's probably a passive balancer. I doubt that they would put an active balancer into their lithium batteries. Most of these companies don't use active balancers. Even Battleborn don't use active balancers in their batteries. just because they're more expensive to manufacture than a passive balancer. So they're probably using higher quality lithium cells than a lot of these cheaper companies. So like these ones here in the background, I don't even know which manufacturer manufactured these. We just got them to test, and they perform pretty well. They're rated at 300 amp hours, but yeah, they do. Battleborn don't, Renogy do on some. Yeah. Again, I don't know that any of them do active balances though. If they do have a BMS, it'll probably be passive, just because a lot of these guys don't go into that level of detail, and or they save a bit of money by using a passive balancer rather than an active balancer. Also the space and stuff like that as well. So I don't have the active balancers that I had, but this is a 200 amp BMS, so it's quite a big unit. But those active BMSs were not far off the size of this. They were probably about 3/4 of the size. So Renogy is only good for batteries and DC to DC chargers though. Yeah. I've not actually used much of Renogy's gear. I know a little bit. I know some people like their solar panels, but it's one of these things. A lot of that equipment, even the big companies like Victron and those guys, most of their stuff is made in China and probably made in very similar factories to a lot of the stuff you get on Alibaba and that. As far as I know, even the Victron stuff, most of their stuff, the parts are actually made in China. They might just be assembled in Germany. Their solar MPPTs are terrible. Yeah, I've not tried the Renogy MPPT chargers. I really like the Victron. Victron makes some great gear, and there's another German company called Vertronics, which I don't know if you can get that in the US, Vertronics, but we get that quite a lot here in the UK. It's quite popular, and their stuff is very good. I've got a couple of their systems in my van. And the Vertronic gear is very good. I've had very good results from that. We've used their stuff in the past as well. And it's been very popular over here in the UK. Yeah, Victron has a pretty price tag on it, but their stuff is very good quality. The thing I really like about Victron is that the integration between all of their products is really strong, and they're really strong on the modern stuff like apps and things like that. So it's really handy to be able to see what everything's doing, and like their smart shunts and all of that sort of stuff, being able to just work with all of that on your phone and stuff is really handy. What do you think about pouch cells? To be honest, I've not played that much with pouch cells. I think it depends on what the application is, but yeah, I haven't played much with pouch cells. It's a bit of a mouthful. Depends what you're using them for, I guess. I have bought some Renogy LiFePO4, and they are pouch cells. Okay, you mean like in using the camper van? Yeah, I mean any of those big brands, their stuff is decent, and they usually have pretty good warranties and stuff like that. So I know Renogy they support their stuff fairly well. Victron as well, and there's also pretty good resources online. A lot of forums and stuff like that. A lot of guys test that stuff, so it's usually a fairly safe bet. But yeah, I've not used a lot of the Renogy stuff. We've used some of their solar panels and that, but not played with their batteries and their chargers in our vans. So yeah. I've got some new cells that I'm hoping will arrive in the next few weeks that we can start testing. Do you think Victron is worth the extra money? That's a good question. Yeah, I mean, they are reliable. I think some of Victron's stuff is probably overpriced for what it is. Having said that, it depends what you do and what you want to do with it as well. So like, if you just want something that you stick in, just leave it and not have to think about it or do anything with it or anything like that, then Victron is a great choice, because you literally put it into your van and you can just leave it, set it up right, connect it all up. You can jump on the app and check things, monitor things. You can be with their like smart shunt and their battery protect and all that sort of stuff, is really good for looking after your gear as well. So from that point of view, Victron is really good. Some of their stuff, so we've been testing like cheaper sort of no-name brand shunts that we bought from Alibaba and AliExpress, and we've got one in particular that we quite like, that it works just as well as the Victron one does. Difference being it doesn't have an app, obviously, and doesn't integrate with the rest of their stuff, but in terms of the accuracy, it's just as accurate as the Victron shunt. And we using the Victron as kind of the benchmark of accuracy, because I think their stuff is very accurate and their quality control is very strong, from my experience. But yeah, so we're using Victron to kind of benchmark this other one that we're testing out of China. But the Chinese one doesn't have an app, so it just has like a wireless display, which is quite handy because it's just charged with USB, so you could literally put the wireless display anywhere in your van, and it would be pretty handy to use from that point of view. So if you just want to like monitor how much power you've used from your battery and what your voltages are and all that sort of stuff, then that sort of thing would be fine. But the Victron stuff, the beauty of it is the app that they have and how it all integrates together and all that sort of stuff, and you can even integrate it with other systems and stuff like that. Lithium's out of most people's price range a lot of the time. Yeah, so the thing is, with lithium though, is if you're talking about like Battleborn or Renogy batteries, those sort of things, then yeah, for the most part, those are well out of people's price range. Because like if you take like, if you want to put in 300 amp hours of like Battleborn batteries, talking about like $3,000 before you even get to your charging systems and stuff like that. Whereas if you build a DIY battery like this, with like Eve cells or something like that out of China, you can build like a 285 amp hour battery for around $600 just with a Dali BMS or something like that. So at that point, to get the same performance, like the equivalent performance of 300 amp hours of lithium out of like lead acid or gel batteries, you'd probably need 4 lead acid or gel batteries to match the performance you'd have from one of these 285 amp hour batteries. So at that point your price is pretty similar, because by the time you've bought 4 lead acid batteries, you're talking about being sort of $500 or thereabouts, so you pretty much matched your price. So at that point lithium is not that much more. Pure sine waves versus cheap inverters, as there are such big price differences. Yeah, so I always go for pure sine wave personally, just because I know of people destroying their electronic appliances using modified sine wave. So if you're charging expensive things like laptops and stuff like that, where especially Apple products, where your Apple power supplies are so expensive and stuff like that, then I would definitely get a pure sine wave inverter. But it just depends what you're putting on there and how much you're using it and stuff like that. So yeah, I mean, there's also been tests that have been done that have proven that a pure sine wave inverter is actually has better results than some grid power as well. So I think who was it who did one? I saw maybe Will Prowse, I think maybe did one. Was it him or someone else who did a test, and I can't remember where they were, but the results were astounding, that the grid power was actually worse quality than what was coming out of the pure sine wave inverter. And I think it was like a Gyndall or something like that he was testing. this one test that I was watching. But yeah, I always go for pure sine wave, just because I don't want to be trashing laptops and phones and whatever else I plug into it. And so yeah, I've used modified sine wave in the past. So I think it really depends on how much you're going to use it and what you're charging on it as well. If you're putting stuff on there like I don't know, cheap appliances or stuff that you're not that bothered about, maybe like an espresso coffee machine or something like that, although those sort of things start drawing quite a lot of power, so at that point you're probably better off with a pure sine wave. But yeah, I mean, my preference is always just a pure sine wave. Inverter is probably the most unreliable piece of equipment. Yeah, it depends what you need to do with it. The nice thing these days is that so much can run on 12 volt, or you can get 12 volt. So like I have a MacBook Pro that I work on and do a lot of my production and video production and stuff like that. And even when we travel, I'll have the laptop out to edit photos and all that stuff. And I bought on Amazon a charger that can run just in a cigarette lighter that charges a USB appliance. And I think it outputs something like 90 watts or something like that, which is plenty for this laptop to charge it. So I actually don't use the inverter in my camper very often, just because most of what we do, I don't use a coffee machine in there, we don't have a microwave, we cook on gas, our water heater and cab heater runs on gas, and we charge our phones and tablets and all that sort of stuff just on USB. So we use the inverter very rarely. I have a Fuel Victron set up in my van. I was just so shocked at the price. Yeah, I mean, you pretty much have to get a bank loan to buy a full Victron kit. So yeah, I mean, it is very good, but compared to some of the competitors out there, it's very expensive. I mean, I was talking. My cousin lives in Colorado in the US, and he's busy building an overlander on a Mitsubishi Fuso truck at the moment. And he was looking at options. He wanted to max out like the maximum roof space on solar. He was looking at all his different MPPT charger options, and I think he landed up buying an EPEVA from Amazon, and he got one that was clearly used and not used well. It was abused. I got it, took it out the box, and the thing was trashed, like scratches all over it. Clearly, it had been used well. And so he ended up sending it back to Amazon, and then when he went to buy a different one, he actually changed his mind and got like the biggest capacity Victron that he could, and it landed up being like $400 or $500, something like that. But it was a lot of money. Yeah, I mean, your Victron stuff will last well, and it is very reliable equipment, and their warranty is very good. So as long as you spec it outright, you should be good with that. Yeah, sorry, just got to off. Yeah, so you're right. As long as you spec'd out your charger and your solar and system and stuff properly, then you should be sweet. Your Victron stuff will last a long time. It's very reliable, and it's very functionally rich as well. Having the app and all that sort of stuff is very, very handy. I love it. I use my DIY battery that I have in my camper van. I use Winston battery cells, and then I'm trying out a 123 electric smart BMS, which is made out of a company in Holland, and they have a really good app. Like, the app is really good. Loads of functionality, has relays on it. The only thing is that it's not high capacity, so the relays are limited at 100 amps. But I don't, for my needs, that's plenty, because most of what we do is just the lights and running low draw on 12 volt, and every now and then we run the inverter for certain things, but really not that high draw on that. But having a good app like that is really handy, and Victron are very good with that respect. The apps are very good. It does take a lot of practice to be confident enough to build a battery, and will it be reliable? So I don't think it. I think if you have a reasonable knowledge of electrics, you'll be fine. And there's loads of information on YouTube and online around that in terms of the practicalities of it and how you actually go about building a battery. The important thing is to make sure that you don't obviously short circuit your cells when you're doing it, and then practice good safety. So always wear eye protection. And I did a live where I put a battery together, and I had all my rings on my hands, and I had a guy messaging me saying you should take your rings off because if you short it you can lose your finger and stuff like that, which he was right. I just took shortcuts and things like that, which is not good practice, but I was happy to just take that risk. But yeah, as long as you practice good safety, it's fine. I mean, where it becomes tricky is if you have a system where you have to be super careful with small shorts that can blow things. So like if you have a look, I think, do I have a video on our YouTube? I'm not sure. But if you look at like the Smart BMS by 123 Electric, that BMS is so fiddly to put together. What I'd recommend is get something like a Dali BMS or an Overkill BMS. They make a really good BMS as well. And these sort of things, this is dead easy to put together because literally once you've assembled your battery and you have your bus bars the right configuration, so once you've top balanced your battery, you then put your bus bars in series so that you create a 12 volt battery. So when it's fully charged, it'll actually be closer to 14.5 volts, but it'll be good to supply 12 volts to your van or boat or whatever. But once you've assembled your battery just with your bus bars, then it's just a case of you connect one of these leads to the negative terminal on your battery and secure this against the battery or next to it or whatever, and then you connect the second lead just to your outgoing negative terminal from your battery, so your charge will always go through the BMS and your draw will always go through the BMS. And then it's just a case of turning the BMS on and connecting the app. This particular BMS uses a dongle like this, so this is a Bluetooth dongle, so you can connect the app on your phone, and it allows you to control it and set parameters and things like that, set your thresholds for low voltage disconnect, high voltage disconnect, your temperature cutoff, all that sort of stuff. And it's not that difficult. The important thing is your sort of safety aspects of it in terms of not shorting anything, and the risk of that, you're not talking about, because it's 12 volt, it can't kill you like 240 volt or 110 volt AC. So because it's DC and it's 12 volt, it's much safer in that respect. The challenge is if you short something, then you can destroy cells fairly fast or deplete their life instantly just by shorting cells and things like that. And the safety aspect of working with 12 volt is if you short cells badly, then they can create a massive spark and actually arc, just like welding essentially, and shoot hot metal and things like that. And so that's why you always wear safety glasses, and why you shouldn't really wear rings when you're doing it, because if you short it on a ring, then you can lose a finger and stuff like that. So that's where it becomes tricky, and so that's really around your safety and then just not destroying the equipment if you created a short. But in terms of the practicalities of it, I'll just move this battery over to explain it. We like to clamp the batteries like this, just because it's quite handy just to carry around. It also increases the lifespan of the cells, because as the cells charge and discharge, they expand slightly, and all of the components within the cells that are laminated, they can move, and when they do that, it can delaminate the insides of the cells. And that can deplete the lifespan of the cells and shorten their lifespan. So we like to clamp them like this, and it also just makes it easier to carry around. But this is configured in series, and so essentially you'd put a bus bar across here and here, here and here, here and here, and then you would connect. Sorry, I'm just checking. Here's your negative terminal here. So you would connect your BMS onto your negative terminal there, connect the other lead onto wherever it's going, your charging system, and a line going to your inverter and a line going to your fuse block, things like that. And then this would be a positive lead going to that stuff as well. And so it's pretty straightforward. So we have a few videos on how to assemble these, and there's loads of stuff online and loads of forums and stuff like that as well. So yeah, it's not that complicated. Once you get into it, just recommend watching some videos and reading up on it and stuff like that. My plan is to use the camper for a few years and get a narrowboat. Yeah, it'll be fine. Yeah, so yeah, so you could definitely use this battery in a narrowboat. I think it would be fine in terms of the grounding. I mean, in a camper, you could use this battery in an isolated way. So depending on if you have like the Victron DC to DC isolated versus non-isolated charger, you could use this battery in a camper that in an isolated setup or non-isolated. So I don't isolate my battery in my camper. I run the ground to the chassis, and then when I obviously charge from the engine, from the alternator, the ground is running through the chassis for that. But in a boat, you could it would be fine. I'm sure you could. I don't think you'd have a problem problem transferring it. And the nice thing with the narrowboat as well is that it's, I mean, you're not talking about being out at sea and having to secure the battery as well as you would if you were in a sailboat or something like that. 280 amp. Yeah, so these are actually these cells are rated at 300 amp hours by the manufacturer. They got stickers on here saying 300 amp hours, but we ran loads of tests and they aren't actually 300 amp hours. They're 285 amp hours. Yeah, I think they were a little bit ambitious with their marketing, and we wrote a review actually that we published just the other day. It's on our website. If you go to the link in our profile, you can find the review there. But it gives you details of who we bought these cells from and what we found of them. So it was a bit of a frustrating thing, but it was partly also just an exercise we were doing for our community on this page and stuff like that, to be able to help people to find good sources of lithium iron phosphate battery cells. Because the trouble that you find is that if you go for the cheapest options that you can find on Alibaba, inevitably they probably won't perform anywhere near the more expensive ones. So if you're talking about something like Winston or Eve, or one of those sort of more well-known lithium iron phosphate manufacturers, their prices are much higher now because the demand is much higher, because they're known for being good quality. So some of the less known ones, so like these ones, we took a bit of a chance just to test them essentially for the community as to whether we can recommend them. And also when we convert vans for people and stuff, we like to have a decent source. So we were kind of also testing it for that as to whether we would recommend it as an option for people if we were converting their vans. Sometimes guys hire us to fit out just the electrical components in their vans, and so we will sometimes build out a DIY lithium iron phosphate battery for somebody. And so we were just looking for options to recommend to people, and these guys are definitely not one of them because their stated capacity. They also don't have any QR codes, which is questionable. When there's a QR code on it, you can at least track it back to the manufacturer and see if it is actually a grade A cell, whether it's brand new or whether it's recycled or whether it's a grade B cell or something like that. These ones have no QR code, so I would not recommend them. Having said that, though, they're very good value for money. So these cells all in delivered here, I think, were something like $450 or thereabouts. The BMS is about about $200 delivered thereabouts. So you're talking about like $600, $650 for 285 amp hours of power, and so from that point of view, it's very good value for money. If you were to match this with lead acid, you'd need 4 lead acid batteries to match the capacity of this setup. And if you went for something like Battleborn or something like that, you'd need 3 of them. So you're talking about like $3,000 plus to get that. So it's very good value for money. But yeah, I wouldn't recommend these exact cells. Price has gone up after Suez Canal. Yeah, I think it has. Yeah, I think there's definitely a delay. We're waiting for a whole bunch of. We bought a bulk of cells, not these ones, some Eve cells, out of China. in the last, when did we order them? Probably about 6 weeks ago or so, and they still haven't arrived in the UK, into the port in the UK. So yeah, I think there is a delay because of the Suez stuff, and yeah, as you say, just because there is a delay and obviously demand has slowed down, I think it has affected the price, because naturally, as soon as there's less product on the market, then the price goes up, because people think that there's less being manufactured, and of course the manufacturers and the sellers will take advantage of that. So yeah, I think the price has gone up because of that. I did top balance these, so these cells I've actually tested quite a bit. So I think I charged them. So initially I just top balanced them when I first got them, and then I assembled them in series to create a 12-volt battery and connected a BMS to them, and then tested them 2 or 3 times, just running, depleting them completely until the BMS cut them off on the low voltage disconnect. And then I recharged them, did that a couple of times, and while I was doing that, I had a shunt and stuff like that, so I was monitoring how many amp hours we got out of them. And then I did them on a cell by cell basis, so I used one of these testers here as well, and so connected it up to each cell individually, and then ran through a couple of tests on each cell individually. So it's quite a time-consuming process, especially when you're recharging them and stuff like that in between each test. But yeah, we tested them quite extensively and consistently got results out that these cells are actually 280 amp hours, not 300 amp hours. But yeah, I then re-top balance them now, and then I'll put them into a rig at some point, having top balanced them again. Your order got cancelled and they told you to buy them again at a higher price. Man, that sucks. Yeah, that is frustrating. I hate that sort of stuff. And I guess at that point you want to move on and buy them from someone else, because that, yeah, that's terrible. But yeah, what can you say? Yeah, we there's a lady that we found just through one of the forums that we're on, a lady called Amy, who is very well connected with a lot of the lithium iron phosphate manufacturers, and so she's been very good, and she's very, very reliable, and she I think, I'm trying to think, when we put our order in, I think it was just before the price went up, and she honored it, so that was pretty good of her, and not to mess us around. But she's kind of riding on her reputation in that kind of industry and within the forums and stuff, to not mess people around. She's quite well connected, so we've ordered some Eve cells from her, and then I think some Lycian cells as well from her. So she's got quite a lot of access to quite a few different manufacturers. Yeah, there's nothing more frustrating than having all the stuff ready to go and then not having the cells, especially having to wait for stuff as well. That's one of the things that frustrates me, is just how long it takes to get stuff out of China. So these particular cells I actually ordered in the first week of January, and I think I only got these like towards the end of March. In fact, no, I think it was actually the beginning of April when I got these cells. So it took well over 2 months to get these cells, and part of that was probably the Suez thing, and kind of part of it also was Brexit and all that sort of stuff here in Europe. But yeah, it was frustrating how long it takes to get some of the stuff out of China. Having said that, though, some of the guys are really good. I think cells are just difficult because you can't ship them airmail, partly just because it's just awkward, and you probably need to look quite hard to find a courier that would actually ship them, and then partly also just because they're so big, they just wouldn't be easy to ship airmail. So we've gone both routes of having them shipped surface mail, so obviously with trains all the way through from China through Eastern Europe and stuff like that, and then we've also gone the option of shipping them through the sea, just sea freight, and sea freight is faster than surface. that we found. But yeah, either way, it still took a long time to get these cells out of China. The ones we're waiting for now, we're probably just over a month in, so hopefully they'll be clearing in UK customs in the next couple of weeks. Bought it from Okay, yeah, we've not dealt with them. Cool. Well, this has been fun. I think I'm going to leave it there. Thanks everyone for tuning in. Like I said, we've got some sales on the way, so we're going to be doing more lives and making new videos when we do get those in. We'll probably do live unboxings and all that sort of stuff. Anyone that's in the UK, we have a whole batch of daily BMSs as well, actually. So if anyone in the UK or Europe needs a daily BMS and doesn't want to wait for a month to get it out of China, then we have these. And we also, we bought them for our own builds and conversions that we work on, but also just to build out batteries and that stuff. So we have some spares as well that we have on our store. If anyone's interested, then go check those out. But otherwise, we'll jump on you. I'm enjoying these lives, so thanks for tuning in. And we'll do this again next week, no doubt. But yeah, have a great rest of your week, and we'll see you around. Cheers. Thanks for watching.